Welcome back to the Uplifters podcast, where every week I have the great privilege of talking to a woman in midlife who's doing big, brave things and sharing her journey so that we can all do big, brave things. It's Women's History Month, so each week we are featuring a woman who is making history. But while we celebrate the women in the past who've made history, it's a reminder for all of us that we have the capability to make history right now. This week, we're going to talk about, little tiny stuff like democracy. Because I kind of think it's something I grew up taking for granted a little bit. But I'm learning more and more that it's a living, breathing thing that requires protection, maybe even mothering in a sense, and something that
Love that.
requires,
I love that.
right? It's like, who better to do it than the mothers?
Yeah.
Today's guest is somebody who lives right at that intersection. Her name is Kerri Kennedy. She is a global peace leader with more than 2 decades of experience advancing human rights, protecting our civic spaces, and responding to political violence all around the world. She currently serves as the International Associate General Secretary at the American Friends Service Committee, where she oversees peace building. I just think, I don't know that I've ever heard a more powerful title, and it literally gives me chills as I say it, and not just because I'm wearing a tank top and a snowy day. She is also responsible for overseeing humanitarian response in times of crisis and specifically migration programs across 4 regions and more than 20 country offices. She's been a national voice on humanitarian crises and democratic resilience, appearing on CNN, Al Jazeera English, and NPR's Here and Now. She writes about authoritarianism, state repression, and how communities build resilience. But here's why she's here today, specifically. As you know, if you've been listening for a while, most of our guests are nominated by previous guests, but this one is mine. I
Thank you.
I asked Kerri to be on the show after being introduced to her work in a very local way, despite all of the global work that she does. Recently, a beloved member of our community was seized by ICE, and the entire community was shaken. But then Kerri and a couple of other women stepped forward, not just with outrage, like so many of us were feeling, but with strategy, and not just with compassion, which certainly there was an immense amount, but also clarity. She brought us together as a community. She galvanized energy in forces that held power and influence. She engaged the media, and she translated our collective fear into collective action. She kept us motivated and moving forward by creating a sense of belief and engagement. And what I witnessed there was just one example of something that's happening all over the world. It's when a woman understands the mechanisms of change. It's when she understands how to bring those forces together in a state of activation to create change and to create hope. This was led by one person, and that person literally could be any one of us. Kerri holds the knowledge and the wisdom, but she is, I hope, a template for the rest of us. Because in a rare story of good news, our neighbor was released from custody.
Yay.
Thank you, Kerri.
So exciting.
It's so exciting, so huge. And it is with great gratitude, but also great optimism and maybe some pragmatism that I welcome you, Kerri, to the Uplifters podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. That was so generous and lovely, and I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that we were connected. The wonderful thing about Roberto's case was that I know how to organize, so I could organize quickly. But there were at least 3 to 4 other women who enabled me to be able to mobilize the community because we had a mayor who set up a GoFundMe. We had I have a friend who gave me a list of media contacts, local media contacts all over New Jersey. So I wrote the press releases. She got me these list of media contacts. We had another person who was connected to Indivisible and local community groups that blasted these vigils out. So it does take all of us, and it was all women. Yay, women.
Yay, women.
Who really did show up. And it does, in this moment in time, we really do need to stand for our values together and mobilize whenever we see something that is an injustice or that we don't think that is the democracy that we want to live in. It really does take ordinary people, everyday, moms, and not superheroes, not ordinary people, but it takes all of us. It takes all of us to stand up and collectively act. So thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. There's so much I want to talk about in this, but let's start with your point about these women coming together. So, one of the things we know is that women in midlife, as much as we get this story that we're past peak and beyond relevance and impact, the truth is neurologically, we are primed for
Mm,
impact and we are better resourced at this stage of life than at any other. And your story there, I think, is a really powerful example of this because we are capable of rallying not just our own knowledge, wisdom, and experience, but also our networks
that's right.
and
Yeah.
of our tools for collaboration. So you've been at this a really long time. You've spent your
Hmm.
entire career doing this work. How do you lead this work differently as a midlife woman than you did maybe in your 20s?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that I know my power and my strength. I don't apologize for anything at this point in time in my life and my career. I can tap into, as you said, vast networks of people, of resources. I think before, maybe in my 20s, I would be less collaborative. Maybe I'd want to go out alone, or maybe I'd hesitate about a decision. Now, with Roberto's example, I saw an issue and I immediately acted and mobilized people together to immediate act. There's no second guessing. They're seeing what needs to be done and then just mobilizing. And, we have this experience to do that. I've done that in earlier cases with the PAC. So I do a lot of global work, but I've also tried to bring that work home to the United States. And 20 years ago, I was in Afghanistan training women members of parliament during an election where they just opened the seats for women members of parliament. So women were being threatened. We were moving from safe house to safe house every day to do these trainings because most of the women had fatwas issued against them. So, but it was a time where Americans were, promoting democracy overseas, and we're saying, we're going to stand with you. We're going to stand for women's empowerment. And when I was leaving, so they had the election. It was great. They had 29, I think at that time, 29% of women in elected office. We at that point had like 26 or 27. So women running at the threat of death in Afghanistan had more women in elected office than we had in the United States. And when I left, I said, what can I do to support you? And they said, go home and get more women elected. So I came home and did that, and started a PAC. So I think, as the years go on, I've just, but it took time. I moved to New Jersey from Pennsylvania, started a PAC here. So I think I've learned through the years that, you just have to see wherever you see an issue that concerns you, you just have to do what you can to remedy that. And it could be big, it could be small. PAC, is local. It's, raises a few $100,000, both of those PACs, but it's something. And it means that I'm moving into action, which is like the thing that I've gotten better and better at through the decades, is to where before I might ponder, what might I do? And I might spend a lot of time thinking about it. I really act. I say, okay, I'm going to test something, and then I'm okay with failure. If I fail, that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
learn and I'll revise. But I really think that I used to have a much more kind of critical hesitancy about thinking through all of the options and what could possibly go wrong. And I don't have that in me. Maybe once I hit 50, that's gone.
I hope so for all of us, but I don't actually think that's the case, right? I do think research shows that we do have a greater sense of identity certainty. We know who we are, to your point about like acting from our values.
Yeah.
By 65, our identity certainty is pretty well stabilized, right? So that
Yeah.
increases up to 65. And that is why I think certainly we see more people become politically active and engaged in second half of life. Also because of course there's for many of us,
Resources.
that's
Yeah.
right. There's more resources, there's less caregiving energy
Yeah.
being spent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and so it's a good time for it. And I think there are actually, we joke like you give fewer fucks in the second half of life. And I think what I'm
Exactly.
hearing you distinguish is we actually maybe give more fucks about some things and fewer fucks about other things.
You summarized that absolutely perfectly. Yes, there is so much that just doesn't bother me or I won't give any emotional space to anymore, which I may have, a decade ago or 2 decades ago. But I really know what matters to me. And I don't hesitate now to act when I see that there's an issue that will affect my family, my community, myself, women, America, global democracy. So it is really a honing in on like I know what's important. I know when I need to like act, and I know what my strengths and skill sets are. Like I've spent a decade organizing, defending democracy, defending human rights, and building peace in authoritarian contexts. So I know what I know. Like I know how to
Mhm.
mobilize. I know how to support human rights defenders. I know how to build peace. I know how to do quiet diplomacy. And when I see a space where my skills add value, I'm going to jump in right away without hesitancy. But if I see I might not because we are women in this age in midlife, we have so many connections and resources. I don't need to do everything. I might
Mm.
not jump into a space where I don't have the right skill set, but I might call a friend to say, hey, there's a problem. Can you address this? And I think it's really not trying to do everything, but for me that's I think I'm really leaning into where I'm strong, where I'm experienced, where can mobilize quickly. Of course, you're always learning and you're always doing. Was looking up like, how do I get better at Spanish and French? Because so many people are calling me. I speak the two most random languages in the world besides English, Tongan and Tetum, which like only a million other people speak in the
Amazing.
world. But so many people are calling me in Spanish right now. And I'm like, oh my God, my high school Spanish is not keeping up. So I am trying to
Ah,
expand my skills, but it's always in service of what it
yeah.
is that I want to accomplish in the world and the impact that I want to have in my community.
Have you always known what your strengths and your purpose were?
It's so funny because I have five brothers. I have three half brothers, two brothers, a twin and a younger brother. And we grew up in, a smallish house in New Jersey, in Union, New Jersey. And I have always been a little fiery and was always a builder because you had to have your voice heard in a family with five boys. And there was always fighting in this small space. So I was always in the middle trying to break up fights, which is funny. So I do think that I knew at a young age that yes, I did know. When I was 3, I wanted to be the first woman president. And so I had a goal of impact in the world that has continued. And then I went into the Peace Corps right after college and lived on a tiny, tiny little island in the South Pacific and then has continued on that trajectory of building peace and trying to create a better world.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think that's somewhat unusual for somebody to
Yeah.
have such a clear and consistent through line.
Yeah, I do. I do. And I've had what I call like thunderbolt moments where it's like a redirection. So
Mm.
I was in the Peace Corps and then I came back and moved to New York and did some work in economic development, which was, a little bit still in that international development space, but a little bit more kind of economically focused. And then 9/11 happened. And I was actually at Rikers Island that day doing a training for youth offenders and my twin brother was in the North Tower, which was the first tower that was hit and the second one to fall. And he was a few floors below where the plane hit. So he did survive, but
Oh
it
my
was,
gosh.
as an awful day. And I had a detective from Brooklyn drive me across the Brooklyn Bridge as people are streaming covered in soot. And I'm trying to find him. And he was a runner, and you can see him when he comes out, and some of the video footage with all of the debris from the building collapsing behind him. And then that was a moment where I said, I have to understand why we have political violence and what would cause these mass atrocities and how do I stop it? So, had those moments and the same thing with Afghanistan where I've, really said, how do we make sure we have a more unified democracy and that we are walking that talk in the United States that I was going as an international person overseas all the time, building democracy, talking about human rights, women's inclusion, but I'm not seeing it play out in the same robust way in the United States. So I've had a few moments in my career where I've kind of had a North Star, but then have had these moments that really have focused me and continued on my path.
Hmm. It's almost like the funnel just narrows a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great way to describe it. Yes.
It's so interesting to me listening to you because I mean, again, going to this idea of identity certainty, you seem like someone who, from a very early age, was clear on your value system and your
Mhm.
beliefs and your purpose, and have just continuously stepped into that. And what that seems to have enabled you to do, that is actually, I think, pretty rare and remarkable, is to, in times of great uncertainty, we've heard you say this over and over again already in your storytelling, in times of uncertainty and sort of like really big, messy, murky problems, you find a way to translate all of the uncertainty into action,
Mhm.
which I think is what we all want to do. We want to engage. A life without purpose really truly feels meaningless.
Yeah,
And so we all want to have a positive impact. Nobody wants to sit in their house all day
yeah, yeah,
and feel overwhelmed and victimized. And yet, without a clear path, that's what happens to so many people.
yeah.
And so I'm trying to sort of get my head around for all of us how we might begin to translate this sense of collective overwhelm
Yes,
from a response of inaction to one of small action.
yeah. I love that question so much. And because that is the way that we change the context in which we're living. If there is authoritarian drift, if there is regression of rights, there is this this number 3.5, which Erica Chen, these scholars, Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan, who are scholars on civil resistance, did this study where they looked at 100 years of civil engagement and looked at what worked. Does violent action, military action work, or does nonviolent resistance work? And they obviously found, obviously to me, because I work in peace building,
I was
maybe
about to
not
say
obvious
obvious.
no, maybe not obvious to everybody else, that nonviolence resistance is the most effective strategy for change, and that you need 3.5% of the population in a sustained fashion to do small acts that add up to collective energy. So I think people think if you think about defending democracy, or if you think about like authoritarian context, people think, okay, there's going to be a violent election that's overthrown, or there's going to be military coming in tanks that are going to take over a leader. And we know that it is not the way that it happens, that there's small administrative, mostly legally bound changes that expand a small group's power. And that change happens by individual people. I mean, we saw in Minnesota, a withdrawal because people showed up on the streets. So many people were writing letters to Congress and their elected officials. There was no denying an output of neighbors, people who were never politically active, saying, we don't want tanks in our street. We see with Target and Costco, when Target made changes to take down their DEI programming, people boycotted Target and their profits have gone down dramatically. Costco said, we are going to double down, and we're not backing out. We're going to dive into it. We're going to expand our DEI programming, and they have reaped the rewards of that. So I would say if you're somebody who doesn't know how to show up, the first thing you can do, and maybe the most important thing you could do, is spend with your values. So money does impact our system, and especially in the United States, I would think about where researching companies and making sure that the companies where you're spending your hard-earned money align with the values that you want to promote. So that's one way. There's so many kind of protests and vigils and trainings right now on know your rights, show up. If you are inclined to participate in that way, that's a great way. And our democracy needs nonviolent action. So I would stand up. I would look at if you're active in a church or in a school, mutual aid networks, and whether that's for a natural disaster. With climate change, we're seeing more natural disasters where neighbors might need help. We saw this during COVID. During COVID, I set up a neighborhood helpers program for a period of time where we just organized community members for people who couldn't go out to shop. And we would organize groceries for them and drop them off at their house. These are really simple things that you can do. You don't have to start it or organize it. You can find one that exists. There's food pantries all over Atlantic Highlands, our local area in Monmouth, and you can find a way to engage. You can also go to AFSC. This is where I work, and we have volunteer opportunities. We have nonviolent movement opportunities to participate in actions. There's always congressional alerts so that you can choose the issue that's important to you. You can sign a letter, you can sign a petition. You don't have to do big things every day. Choosing one thing a week and deciding to call your congressperson and getting your position on paper or on the phone or using your dollars and where you participate, all those things add up and one person makes a difference there.
I love that menu of options because it really is saying, like, meet yourself where you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And talk to each other. So
Yeah.
this is something where I think when we see deeper polarization and division in the United States, in the peace building community, we look at like neuroscience and like I'm sure in your work that you've heard
Mhm.
like studied mirror neurons and
Mhm.
how you are more empathetic to people who are in your in group and less empathetic to people in your out group. And you can train your brain to have your in group be more expansive. So your in group, like my in group could be my neighbors. It could be redheads. It could be people who speak Tongan. It could be people who are peace builders. It could be people who have children in the schools that we have. And the more we say, and our brain, the way that our brain operates and biology, and the more we can say, find commonality with as many people as you can, and then you can have broader conversations where you can try to find value that expands, that doesn't polarize, but actually goes against that and really tries to expand inclusivity and who is American and who counts. And I think everybody can do that in an individual capacity. If you disagree with somebody, rather than kind of digging in and being polarized, really trying to think about how can I find commonality with this person where we might be able to open dialogue, have more respect. And I think that there is a tendency right now in this point in time where people are kind of getting more entrenched in their positions and
Mhm.
having less dialogue because of our algorithms. Understanding that people also need their safe space. So people have to make decisions about where they engage and how they engage. But I think that we will be better if we try to find more common ground with more people around us, especially starting at a local community level. And you can do that with your neighbors. I know you do that because you've told me really amazing things that you've done. And I'm sure you share that too here, like with the sourdough bread. Like that's such a great example of building peace in community. And we can all do that every day.
We went out and shoveled all of our neighbors
You're
the
so
other
lovely.
day. We had
Are you
so much
serious? I
fun.
love
I mean,
it.
it was a good workout
Amazing.
and it was a good excuse to talk to neighbors.
Yes.
And, we didn't hit everyone, obviously, but anybody who was outside, we were like, can we lend a hand? And the woman who lost her husband recently, we went and shoveled for her. And for us, it was just like, it was a no brainer.
Yeah,
And it was very important community building because we want to belong in our community, which means we
exactly.
need to engage and make an effort in belonging.
That's exactly right. I love that you do that and such a good example for the kids, for your children, and to do that as a family. Like it's amazing. And we are, yes, biologically driven to want to belong. That is like
Yeah.
our most fundamental human
Yeah.
need is to connect and see each other. And that freeze that everybody's feeling right now, that darkness is because we're getting this onslaught of information in a non-natural way. The connections that we normally
Mhm.
have are becoming divisive. And it can feel like a dark time. And I think knowing that there's this plethora of ways to engage from a local neighborhood space to go to your federal, your elected official, it really will help to start to move you towards action. And I spoke at Brookdale Community College the other day for their Civility Week, and we had so many kids there, so many students. Who said this feels so dark and it's so encouraging to just see how we can just make these little changes to make the world a better place. And I worry about, our kids, especially who are looking at like, what does the future look like? And
Yeah.
so I think, being more practiced at taking these small steps and helping our family members and our children take these small steps, I think is really important.
I love that. Yeah. And I think this is a message we shared on the last episode. So if you're listening to this episode with Kerri, go back and listen to the last episode if you haven't, because I think they're good companion pieces. We talked to two opposing mayoral candidates in our small
Oh, you did?
town.
Oh, I saw that. I didn't hear it though. I'll need to go and check it. In
And
Highlands, right?
yep,
Love
yep,
it.
about, like civic disengagement, the fact that only 50% of this tiny population voted, but also what that says about people's willingness to stand up and create change, and the power of rival candidates coming back together after elections to stand in alignment against common shared beliefs and values at this hyper local level. And so our key takeaway from that conversation was get off social media and get
Yeah.
social.
Yes.
And I
I will
hear that reflected here.
1000%. And I ran for local office in my small town and did not win, but was appointed to serve for a period of time. And I'm a Democrat. This town there's Democrats and there's Republicans and there's some deep division. However, we're going to see each other at
Mhm.
the school pickup and at the grocery store. So civility is really important. And even if sometimes things got a little tense in the election period, for a period of time, I know that my neighbor's going to help me shovel snow, no matter what their political party is, if I need it. And so it does allow you to navigate those differences in a more in a better, easier way that builds the fabric of our community rather than pulls at it.
I love that. Now, I want to talk to you about something that sort of builds on this, which is that we've talked a little about like what the experience is of people who are feeling paralyzed by the scale and scope of the problem. But I want to talk about the people who are just freaking exhausted from fighting.
Yeah.
So we
Yes.
talked a little bit about where we are right now, but I think if we look back, there were great surges of civic disobedience in 2020
Hmm.
that felt like a powerful force, and I think there was a time that felt like change was happening for the good of democracy, and that we were making a difference. And then I think you have a lot of the people who were really loud and brave during that period are just freaking exhausted and beaten down
Yeah.
by what has felt like a bit of a seesaw effect or a boomerang. I don't know what the right metaphor is there, that has left them feeling disempowered. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, as somebody who's been in civic engagement for literally decades,
Yeah.
how you sustain energy and how you sort of reinvigorate that when it feels like, damn, this is exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting. And so the work that I do is decades long work, not year long work,
Right.
not monthly work. It's decades long. And I once talked to Desmond Tutu about this, who's Reverend, who was really
Wow.
instrumental in the anti-apartheid movement, who was a partner with Nelson Mandela. I said, what gave you hope during all of these years? And he said, I just kept looking for the good Samaritans. And I just kept looking whenever I had moments
The Mr.
where it was
Rogers advice.
exactly when the
Look for the
helpers, whenever
helpers.
things
Yeah.
were so dark, you will find helpers and you will see people who are doing good things in the community. And I look for them for help. But the metaphor that I think of for all of us who are in the movement in a deep way or coming in and out and getting active and coming out is that to think of it as a chorus. Um, or a choir.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, one person, no one person can sustain any movement anywhere in the world. And it relies on collective action. And the chorus or the choir, if I'm tired and my voice is tired, I take a rest and no one is going to notice my silence because the group is going to sustain the sound. So that is what I really say, we have to take care of each other. We have to take care of ourselves. Another thing that's interesting is as I get older, I prioritize sleep more, where I used to be like, I'm an early riser. I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm going to do my workout. No, thank you.
Same.
And as my kids became teenagers, they want to talk at night. Like, I'm not getting up early. So you have to shift your lifestyle. And if it changes the way that you act or your daily life, like you have to be willing to give yourself grace. And I do really prioritize you know, going in the sauna, doing my workout. If I don't get my workouts in and looking for me meditative workouts as much as
Mm.
possible. So like I swim, I ski, things where I'm like where the noise, I try to do things where the noise is shut out and I could get into like a state where I can't, my brain isn't cycling about like what I need to do or like what the problems in the world are, but I'm entering this different state. And when it's really great, I can do that. And also I lift heavy. That's another time
Mhm.
if you have a heavy barbell, like you can't be worried about what you have to do, to accomplish your work. You're thinking about lifting. So I try to find those things. But I think everyone needs to give themselves grace, show up where they can, know that it's not about the one person or the 10 people or the 100 people or the one leader that's going to come save us. It's about the collective. It's about the energy of, and that goal is 3.5, sustained population. And I'm using the United States as an example. So that's the goal. Get as many people as possible so that you can give each other breaks.
I love that. It also strikes me from a behavior change standpoint. One of the things we talk about, of course, all the time is goal setting.
Yeah.
And I wrote about this week in my newsletter, the way that I had to remember in weightlifting, specifically to your
I
example,
love that. Yeah.
the power of medium term goals.
Yes.
Because I had these short-term goals, and having been a runner my entire life, like, I understood what my medium-term goals were. It would
Right.
be to PR in a race. It would
Yes.
be to add a new distance goal. But now having shifted to weightlifting, I didn't there was, "Oh, I'm gonna go up 5 pounds and this or that,"
Right.
right? But, like, that wasn't adding up to anything.
Right.
It lacked a sense of significance, and then there was, like, the really far out goal of, "I'm gonna be able to be mobile in my 90s."
I love
I'm
that goal.
right?
Yes.
Those are
I'm
great
right there with
goals.
you. Yes.
They
Yeah.
are not
What are you going
motivating.
to do this year? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Our goals, in order to be meaningful, need to feel like they accumulate into
Yeah.
something that is within our eyesight.
Yeah.
And so for me, like now I have a medium term goal
What is it?
for my, I just learned the term because I went to my trainer and I was like, this is what I'm lacking.
Yeah.
This is why it feels sort of silly and meaningless. And I just like show up. And so for my overhead press is to lift a plate, which I'll
Oh,
actually get to in like 2 weeks, which is the
amazing.
barbell plus a
Yes.
45-pound weight on each side.
Love it. Yes.
And I was like, now I'm at like a barbell plus 35 pounds on each side. We're very close.
Yes.
But I didn't know that was a thing,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Like,
Absolutely. I'm setting goals all the time. Like, I want to get to, I do try to do that idea of like the 1% better every day, noting that sometimes you're going to backslide,
yeah,
sometimes you're really going to get there, but building on some medium goals might be like, I have an aspiration to lift like my body weight or like 3/4 of my body weight in a year, or I want to squat double my body weight, which,
love
I
that.
used to be able to do. I haven't, I can now.
Yeah, I
It's,
can't do
it's
double.
been a while, but
I
yeah,
do my,
so it's like,
my body weight, but not.
I think it's my child's body weight maybe.
Yeah,
But yeah,
maybe.
it's setting those getting those goals that are like, what can you really accomplish in a year? Or even I'm sure you've heard this about you can do more within a 3-year period than you think and less in a 1-year period.
Yeah.
So, I even start to I do some goal setting for myself of like, okay, what do I think I want to do in a year? What do I want to do in 3 years, 5 years? And then I kind of stop. And I do like once or twice a year analyze, am I spending the right amount of time on work, family, other things that bring me joy? Health, like, so I do actually consciously do these check-ins, not in like a rigorous
Love
way,
it.
but just like, how am I doing? And if something feels off, I'll sit down and like write about it and think like, okay, I need to maybe do less of this and more of that. So there's always that recalibration to try to get to to progress,
Yeah.
which because I do think like my point in life is like impact in the world and progress. Like, how do I be a better, kinder, more loving, more present person? And I work for a Quaker organization, and I'm not Quaker. I'm a Catholic, lapsed Catholic, who's very Quaker aligned. But they have this concept of continuous revelation, which is like, how do we as people like be more true
I
to the
freaking love
world?
these Quakers. If
I
I were
know
going
the
to
way.
take up religion, that's totally where I would go.
I'm always on the fence of like, should I just join a meeting? But it's like work. It's a lot. It's like Quakers like to work because they're very socially justice oriented. So it's like,
I
do I
like
want to
these
join a
people.
meeting? But the So I do really live out the values of Quakerism, and that continuous revelation is just beautiful. Like, you're not going to be perfect every day, but can you try to be a better, like I try to be a better leader, a better mom, a better community member.
Hmm.
And, it's like, if I do, and I do things that are not right and I make mistakes, and then you try to look inside to say, like, what can I learn from that to be better the next time? And yeah, there's really great kind of foundational, humane kind of thinking and processes in Quakerism.
I love that. And if we then apply this whole thinking around how we set ourselves up for success to this idea of civic engagement, I think what we're saying is, what is 1% better for you? Is
Exactly.
it, I'm going to make one phone call this
Right.
month? I'm
Exactly.
going to make one different choice in how I spend my money this month. And maybe my medium term goal is I'm going to do that 12 times this year.
I
Or
love
maybe the
that.
goals aren't even just the action, but a felt measure of I feel more connected. I feel less disempowered or more capable of creating change. And so really being conscious to your point about checking in with ourselves about like, what change do we want in the world
Mhm.
and in ourselves? And how will we measure that success so that we just stop feeling like kind of shit on by the world?
Yeah, and, you could even turn off the news and, like, go walk outside. People are always shocked to
Radical.
know how little I listen to the news, and I do not listen. I read, so I and but newspapers are like the print, press is not as, urgent, time pace. Like, you're not going
Mhm.
back. We're not going back to our old days where it was you have to go look up what happened yesterday, but you're not getting that 24-hour pundit cycle. And I love media. So it is, but it is making sure that I'm not hearing what a news company wants me to hear, and I'm consuming news in my own
Right.
way. And I feel like a lot of people are watching a lot more news lately, and that is not natural for us. And we should try to break that. I mean, we live by the beach. Part of the reason I moved from Philadelphia to this lovely little place in Monmouth County. I love Philly too. Philly is bless you. Philly's a
Thank
great
you.
city. I love it so much. But the fact too that, like, we can walk outside and see the ocean and the bay. And there is like neuroscience that says that the blue of the water like calms your brain. Try the going into a forest, or there's lots of hiking trails or green spaces. There's also like scientific data that says like that calms
My
your
system.
adrenal system, your nervous system, so your nervous system. So I would look for these things too. Like, these are small changes that can like give you some hope and balance in this time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find so often the right advice is to do the opposite,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like if you're sitting all the time, stand up.
Exactly.
If you're spending time on a screen, get in nature. If, right, like
Very
the
That's so
opposite.
wise. That's exactly right. Yes. Yeah, I love
If
that
you're
advice.
alone, get together.
Yes.
The opposite is always going to be uncomfortable
That's right.
and it's also going to rebalance.
And the uncomfortable spaces is where we grow. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's like, make are you uncomfortable now, and then you grow and you're in a better space. I mean, we have to we are designed to experience, to keep testing ourselves and to experience discomfort in a, reasonable way, not in a space where I saw that you did like the soft 75, and I loved that so
Mm.
much.
Just take the
'Cause like,
pressure off.
yeah, like, challenge yourself and, like, push yourself to limits, but,
Yeah.
like, don't we don't have to go crazy.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to suck. We can
Yeah,
actually enjoy
yeah.
being good
I
to ourselves.
I love the headstand. That was, like, amazing. Like, that's such a good goal. So, like, how can we do these things that stretch us, but, like, that aren't making us painfully uncomfortable, but that is where we're gonna grow, and we're gonna be nurturing a better future self of ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, in this time that you mentioned how afraid our kids are of the future, both
Mm.
politically, culturally, technologically, there is a lot that is uncertain for these kids. And I think we can learn a lot for ourselves from what we tell our children because we tend to tap into our better wisdom when we feel like we're handing it down to another generation. So I'm curious what you tell your kids about what matters now when they are afraid of the future.
Yeah. It's interesting because my kids see me act in the world and, they seem, I feel like they are learning a lesson of engagement. And they're worried. I think sometimes they're worried for me, like so the work that I do when I'm traveling to like risky places. And I do try to demonstrate by example and words that we have to show up for the ideals that we care for. And my greatest hope for my children is that they're good people and that they find a way to make an impact in the world that's positive in whatever way they define that positive impact can be. It doesn't have to be in my space of peace building community. It could be music, art, it could be engineering, science, business, but think that is what we spend our evenings, talking about when we play game night. We think about like, what do we want to do to make a difference in the world? And how might we do that? And yeah, I think it's scary. And I think it's scary too, like when you are doing it in places where it's like smaller town, there's less engagement. Like, in Philly, everyone we knew is outside with a sign all the time. You show up and are seen in a different way in different settings. And so, my advice to them always is like, you have to be true to yourself no matter what people think about you, and you have to be kind to others, but like your path is not their path and their path is not your path. And, the most important thing is to try to find that path that works for you. And mine has been, pretty clear. And I do recognize not everybody's has been, but I have so many like friends and colleagues that do amazing work that have had done this spiral or the zigzag. And that's great too, like to take the path wherever it takes you at this moment. But I really try to really highlight this idea of sense of self and like understanding who you are and what you need. And
Yeah,
yeah, and
I love
that's
that.
important, especially I have preteens and teens when that's tricky for that age.
Yeah. It's also, I think, an answer to the question of AI is coming for us is stay true to yourself,
Yeah.
right? So it's the same answer there.
Yeah. AI is like great and awful and wonderful. And
Yeah.
there's
And
always
it's
going to be a need for humans. Always.
inevitable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, so I keep wanting to close this out and then thinking, I've got to ask her this. Your kids ask you mentioned your kids' fear for your safety.
Yeah.
And I think historically, I've gone out and done my women's march and I've done my this march and my that march. And I take my kids and we did our No Kings protest. And my kids
Great.
grow up. And my daughter, my 17-year-old, the other day said, I'm so like, it was really actually a very sweet moment. She was like, I'm so grateful that you just made that a part of who we were growing
Love
up
it.
so that
Right.
it was
So
never a question.
natural, right?
However, I notice for myself, and I suspect I'm not alone, that I feel more afraid now because it feels like all bets are off. As a privileged middle class white woman, always sort of felt this sense of freedom moving through the world, a sense of, for the most part, I mean, certainly there are scary things about being a woman in the world, no doubt,
Yeah.
but there is an enhanced sense of like lawlessness and fear
Yeah.
that we now are exposed to and seeing be more pervasive. I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't just sound like completely out of touch with reality, but I'm curious, like, how do you reconcile that very real physical fear? Because you've faced that more directly over and over again than the vast majority of us.
Yeah. Yes, I have in many countries in which I work.
Mhm.
And so I do have a comfort with, I mean, I am in my field because of a certain makeup that makes me me. That
Yeah.
so I have a
Yeah.
comfort with risk. I have that might be higher. I have a way that I have a practice and some teachings to navigate risk. I, can do engage diplomatically and in a way that is that has kept me safe. And I will say that there is less safety in the world in some spaces, like where as a humanitarian or a peace builder, you always had your vest on and you were fairly protected. And in the past years in Gaza and other spaces, we've seen that protection no longer is
Mhm.
as true as it used to be.
Or in Minneapolis.
Or in Minneapolis, exactly. And I do think that the world demands us, especially those with privilege, to stand up in front of those with less privilege. That is the only way that social change happens. I think we can be, when I do trainings on organizing and safety, which I do, I tell people like to look at how do we reduce risks. We don't want to be saviors or heroes, so we want to make sure we minimize risk.
Mhm.
But there's not risk-free ways to make social change,
Mhm.
especially social change where you are trying to dismantle systems of oppression
Mhm.
that exist in the world, whether that is a political system, whether it's a system of patriarchy. There is no risk free way to do it. And we've seen when we got our right to vote as women, the women who were suffragettes were put on feeding tubes, were arrested, many were killed. Same thing with Quakers who fought for civil rights. Any civil rights movement have had their fair of people. And now we see today in Minneapolis, people who were bystanders and were killed for that. And that is awful. It is everyone has taken a measured risk, but there's no way to make this change without some risk. And the more people do it, the more protection there is. So this is again going back to that collective action. If you can do something with a group of people, that's safer. If you know your rights. And, I really urge anybody who's showing up to action to practice nonviolent action and discipline. So if somebody's yelling at you, like can you react in a calm way? A lot of this takes practice. And that's why there's people like me who are in the field who are being safety marshals because we can and if you can go to a training on de-escalation, there's so many resources out there right now. Do that. Practice that de-escalation in your community. If you find something ACLU or somebody else doing something, join that because the more that we are skilled in this, the safer it will be for everybody. And I do live with this idea of shared security. It's like none of us have safety until all of us have safety. And that's this Ubuntu theory too from South Africa. So from how do we build a world where we are creating more safety and security for everyone, but it does take some courage and some risk. And only you know what your tolerance is for engagement
Mhm.
around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk a lot about fear thresholds, and I wrote that phrase down early in our conversation because
Yeah.
I think about how you have built your fear threshold
Yeah.
for decades
Yeah.
again. And each of us, again, though, has that capacity to build that fear threshold by taking a tiny step in. And
Exactly.
I think our brains have a tendency to create soup out of potatoes and onions and carrots. And suddenly it just becomes like fear. Fear is fear. And I'm not going to step in because I could get injured. But the truth is, you can step in ways that have very less risk of physical threat. So let's
That's right.
disentangle these
That's right.
ideas.
That's right. Yeah. If
Step in where you feel comfortable.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Use your money.
Yeah.
Spend and that's
Write a
like a
letter.
huge impact. Call people instead of showing up
Yeah.
in person, like all of those things. Go where you're comfortable. And then also assess the risk. And because, our brains sometimes tell us that there's a heightened risk where there might not be. And
Yep.
and sometimes we miss where the real risk is.
Yeah.
So because of again, we're living in a world where our brains haven't caught up to what is fear and what is not. So, also say like, is there a, try to get to the sense of the reality of the fear as much as possible.
There's an activity that I do in my daily practice, which is I write down everything I'm a little bit afraid of or worried
Mhm.
about for the day. And then I say, okay, what am I actually worried will happen?
That's a great exercise. Yes.
Because once I look at that, I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not that realistic, or oh,
That's
that's
not
not
going to
that big a
happen.
deal. I can
Yeah.
handle that. And then I ask myself, like, how do I make this easier?
Yeah. I
Right.
love that.
And we
That's a
break
great
it down
idea.
into little steps. And I think that that works so powerfully here. So I'll be sure to share that technique in the show notes as well, where I've documented. Kerri, I'm just so grateful to be on this planet at the same time as you.
Aw.
And I'm so grateful that our paths crossed. And I'm so grateful that you said yes to this conversation, but even more so that you're saying yes every day to showing up for our collective well being. Every guest on the show nominates another guest. Who would you like to nominate as an uplifter?
So I did nominate, and I want to somebody who works on my team. Her name's Marcia, fabulous human rights lawyer. She's the director of our Latin America work. She lives in Costa Rica. There was a plane of people who were deported to Costa Rica who were not from the Latin America. They were from Russia, Afghanistan, Armenia, and she worked with a journalist and another group. I think it was the Jesuits, and filed a habeas petition to the Costa Rican government to get protection for those and some support for those people because they were just stuck. So they had come to the country and then they were just stuck there with nothing, no way to move. So she did get this constitutional win with the Costa Rican government to give anybody who was mistakenly deported to Costa Rica asylum and some protection and some way to move forward and not be stuck in limbo for years. So that was really brave, and it's a big win, and it's something to study in Latin America where, that's the other side of where we are sending so many people through these mass deportations. So she'd be lovely.
I would love to talk to her. And yeah, I think I hear in that potentially there's a blueprint for other countries.
Yes.
For this new time. Again, it's like with AI, we are not living in past pre-AI times. We are living in AI times. And so we are also living politically in some very unique times. And so, yeah, can we build new responses that respond to where we are now, not where we were? I
That's
love
right.
that.
Yeah. Well, this has been so great. And I say I'm so glad that we met as well. And we'll have to lift weights together or sauna
Yes,
together.
or go for a hike or a sauna
yes,
or all of it.
We're so close. So we can do all of it, which is so fun.
It.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kerri.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, really. So fun to be here.
Thanks for watching the Uplifters podcast. If this inspired you, hit subscribe and tap the bell to stay uplifted. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a little lift today. Big love.
Painted water sunshine with rosemary and thyme. Dwell in the perplexing, though you find it vexing. Toss a star and hover, be your own best lover. Relish in a new prime, plant a tree in springtime. Dance with idle hindsight, bring the sun to twilight.